before 1935. Oh, you still got me beat. I know that there were quite a few that were still here. I had some names written down, and I have Josie Davis Carter was here, and Dottie Raymond Whitaker. John and Hugh Holmes, of course, were down here. Polly Moore Sensman, that's the daughter of the family that has Moore's stone crab over in Longboat. She lives in Cortez. Of course, Betty Lou Blackburn Hughes, who is living in Pamasola, the daughter-in-law of Ed Hughes and the daughter of Hartley and Betty Blackburn. Hartley was the superintendent of schools here for a number of years. And Kimball Welsh, of course, was here with her family at that time. You know, my father, as she mentioned, was a writer, and he loved this island dearly. And one of the articles that he wrote a number of years ago, I believe it was for the Ford Times, was called Anna Maria, I Love You. And in that article he mentioned, if you take a screwball anywhere in the world and blindfold them, turn them around 3 times, and let them loose, they'll wind up on Anna Maria. Well, here we are. It's seen its day. We've had some of the best in the world, the best screwballs. I had lived in many places before, at my tender age, I arrived here. At the age of 6 in 1936. I'd lived in a lot of places for a little girl. But I didn't realize when I got here that I had actually come home. I've left it a number of times, but I've always come back, and I always will, because this is home. And any of you who've been here for a while know that there's just no other place in the world like Anna Maria. When we first got here, my mother came up to New York to get me. She had married my stepfather. It was not my stepfather, but my father, Wyatt. And they had come down here for their honeymoon, and she came back up to New York to my aunt's to get me. And we came down here by ship from New York to Jacksonville. And you don't see much of that anymore. And we were to take a train to Tampa, but the train was delayed or something. I'm not really sure what the circumstances were, but I was so excited to get here. I could not wait. And so we took a bus from Jacksonville down to here. That would be a long trip today. But if you can imagine doing it in 1936 in the heat with nothing resembling a superhighway, nothing resembling much of a highway. And it took forever, but it was worth it. The first time, here, the photograph up here of the pier. We lived in a little house. I don't know the names of streets down here because we didn't call them by streets years ago. It was the such and such cottage, and you lived down from there. But it was called the Lorraine Cottage. It was built by Corey Chambers Sr. right down on the bay, a little stone house on the corner of, was it Spring? And the old timers are nodding, yes. And Bay Drive or whatever goes along. Okay, and it was the only place anywhere near. And we lived there for a while. Down a little bit further to the left of us was where Josie lived at that time. Josie was just a little, you were a baby at that time. And a little bit further down was where my friend Polly Moore, that I just mentioned, lived. And that was actually, at that time, the last house on the bay. The geography of this island has changed tremendously. You didn't go any further than that. There weren't any more roads. The island cut across, and that's just about across, I believe, from where the picnic area is down on the bay now. That was the last house. The bay came right on around, joined the Gulf at the pass, and picked up on the other side, on the Gulf side, just about a block and a half or 2 blocks north of, what's the one? The Pine, north of Pine. And on Gulf Drive, just keep going straight, but you'd only go about 2 blocks more, and there was a house there. I know that Jack Holmes had built some homes back in the area, but there was nothing but a little shell road that went down to them. They weren't on the water, and just a little, that wasn't even shell, it was a sand road that went down to them. But that was all there was. All of those houses, all of that land that is down on the point now was underwater. And hopefully it won't be again. Right down on Spring to the, what used to be Pavilion, now where the sandbar is, a lot of the people that are here now might not realize that there was another whole street there. There was a row of houses, another street, a stand of Australian pines, and then the beach that went way on out there. Some of those houses were moved, picked up and moved to other places. Some of them rolled out and were gone. But the island is very different. We didn't have all these paved roads, some of which have been paved even in the last few years. Everybody carried some cardboard in their car to help them get out of the sand, because you were constantly getting stuck in the sand. Most of the roads weren't even shell. They were sand. Now some of the big ones, like Spring Street, was shell, but Pine was paved, and that was one of the few. That and Gulf Drive. Am I right about that? I can't really remember too well exactly what was there. It was a long time ago. When I got here, there weren't many kids my age. There was a little girl named Joanne Stewart, who was just my age. Her daddy was a carpenter. And there was my friend Polly. And the three of us were friends for many, many years. We stayed the only 3 girls our age for a long, long time. Joanne did live here for a while, a few years back, but has moved on. But we keep ourselves, I wouldn't want to say busy, we kept ourselves happy. We moved all around the island barefoot. The heat never seemed to bother us. The mosquitoes didn't bother us. I guess they did, but we got so used to it that we didn't know about it. At this point, I've been stung so many times, and I'm sure all of the rest of you who've lived here all these years can testify to the same thing. I'm totally immune. Mosquitoes won't get near me. If they do bite me, they go off and die. I'm fine. We'd sort of wander around the island. There were fruit trees everywhere. I'm sure they belonged to somebody, but we didn't know it. And we'd pick fruit, grapefruit, the big oranges, and those wonderful big lemons. Remember those great big thick-skinned lemons that we used to get here on the island? Guavas and mangoes. And we loved to put salt on it. We'd carry a salt shaker around in our pocket and peeled the lemons, they're thick skins, and peeled them. They were sweet, and would sprinkle salt on them. And same with the grapefruit. This day, I take salt on my grapefruit. And lots of lemons and water. And lips is really good. That's fine.
Peggy, could you stand up closer to the table here and be in the light more?
Sure. See, what have I forgotten? I remember the first time I ever went out on the pier, which looked differently, because it had a separate section that came off to the side that was washed away in some hurricane or another. A smaller, lower deck that came off to the side on the right-hand side of the pier. First time I went out there was shortly after I got here. And I had just come from Brooklyn. And I was absolutely petrified. There were great big gaps in the planks. Some of them were kind of rotted, or they had knot holes that were were just holes now. I was terrified. I was absolutely convinced that I was going to go right through. I remember walking right smack down the center of the pier with my father standing next to me, assuring me I was going to be all right, and I knew it was my last day. And how many happy, happy days I've spent on that pier since, fishing. And when I was in high school, a lot of us would go down and dive off the end. I guess that was when that platform was still there, so we could get back up, because otherwise I have no idea how we got back up onto the pier. But that has been a happy time. It was one of the few places on the island back then that you could go to do anything. We had the community center, community hall, as it was called then, community hall, where the church dinners, the church suppers were held, Red Cross classes were held there, assorted in various things. As a matter of fact, when I was 17, my friends all gave me, and Josie, you may remember this, gave me a surprise birthday party there. And I came in to find that all of my friends were gathered there with a big Christmas tree. My birthday is on Christmas Day. With a big Christmas tree, and it was another wonderful memory of the community hall. There was Wardig's Grocery, which is right where the post office is now. That was our grocery store. And of course the IGA didn't exist, but pre-IGA there was Phillips Grocery Store was in that, where the IGA is now. Those weren't there at all. And the post office was just a few, very few little post-it boxes on one wall of the grocery store. And that and Rosa Church, Rosa Memorial was the only church down here. We didn't have nearly enough people back then to split denominations. If you tried to have a Baptist church down there, if you had two Baptists, that's what would have gone. But we just didn't have enough people. I believe when my family came down here, on the entire island, there was a voting population of 100. That was the whole thing. But you have to realize that also Holmes Beach didn't exist back then either. That was built later by the Holmes family, but it was just jungle and weeds and eventually a little tiny airfield back in the middle of the jungle. But I believe that was built for the movie On an Island with You with Esther Williams. If it wasn't built for that, it was built just at that time, and so they used it for it. But it was about 1945 or 46 or something in there that they built that. We didn't have places to go. We didn't have TV. We didn't have video games. We didn't really have much radio. We were really blessed. The kids today are bored with everything, and we made so much fun out of what we had. I wouldn't have traded it for anything in the world. It was really, really happy times, wonderful times. In the summer, one thing I did want to remember to say, in the summer we would do this often. We'd go down to what used to be called the Bayou. Now it's a great, enormous marina down what road? Okay, down the bay. You know where it is. You all know where the marina is. Well, then there was a sand road, just a sand road, that went down there to this beautiful, quiet bayou. Nothing there. Gorgeous, mangroves. Absolutely beautiful. And there was an old gentleman that lived down there named Mr. Olson. Mr. Olson was a hermit. He lived in his much ancienter car down there. And he had a couple of rowboats that he would rent, to whom I have absolutely no idea. But there weren't that many people, and most people had a boat, but he would rent the rowboat to go out scalloping. But we girls would go down there, but of course we didn't have any money, and so he just let us take a rowboat out into the bayou, and we could go scalloping out there. Mr. Olson was one of those that my father was talking about turning around and letting loose. Very kind, very sweet and lovely man, but his claim to fame was as soon as you went down there, he would go out and get his wife for you to meet. His wife was in a jar. She had been cremated, and he carried her ashes everywhere, and he introduced her as Mrs. Olson, and you had to say how do you do, and once you had met and sat down and chatted for a while, then you could go about your business. I never knew what happened to Mr. Olson. Does anybody know? It never happened. Eventually, yes. Somehow I'm not surprised. He was about died down there at the bayou? Do you know, or had he left there?
And
by
there
the-
was something in the Island paper about when he died, but it's been quite a while and I don't remember.
Well, it must have been a long time ago. He was a very elderly gentleman, I remember back there. When we'd wander around out here in our barefoot and so forth, I remember getting sand spurs. I imagine there's still some sand spurs left on the island, aren't there? Well, there were billions of them then. And the nice purple ones, those are the ripe ones. Those are the ones that really, really sting. And I was afraid to pull them out, so I'd carry some scissors in my pocket, and I'd just cut them off and leave the thorn in my foot. Why I never got gangrene, I have no idea why I'm still here. But I'd walk around hobbling with the thorn stuck there in my foot forever. I probably still have some somewhere up in there. But, let's see, what have I left out? The church, the Rose Memorial, even here it's been added on to. Miss Kathleen, who was Kathleen Jones Donovan. Her father was one of the very early settlers here on the island, Captain Jones. Miss Kathleen was a devout Catholic and had to drive into Bradenton to go to Mass. But in the mornings, particularly in the winters when we didn't have a regular minister here, we didn't have somebody, or maybe it was in the winter when we did have a minister here and we needed some more help. That's what it was. She would come down and play the piano for our services at Roser before she went on to Mass in Bradenton. And I don't know that I recognize the old church as it was. There was a little stone building, some sort of a back building out in back of it that I remember teaching Sunday school. And Josie, I think you were in my class, if I'm not mistaken. That was before the Baptist church was built.
I remember well.
Quite a while before it was built. Let's see. Miss Kathleen is somebody else I wanted to mention. In our school, Anna Maria School, which of course is now where the youth center is, right? They had just built the second room onto the school the year that I got there. Before that, it had been the one-room schoolhouse that's in the picture up here on the desk. And they built the second room. We would start out the beginning of the year with one room only, with all 6th grades in one room, because there were not enough kids. There were anywhere between 12 and 15 children on the whole island that would go. And there was a bus that would pick the children up, driven by Mrs. Cobb, Humbug Cobb. I'm sure you've all heard of Humbug. Louis Melvin Cobb, called Lou Mel, as he hated it by Miss Kathleen. But his mother drove the school bus and would go down to Bradenton Beach and pick up the children and bring them down. Then in the height of the tourist season, when the island was just full and we get up to 20 or 25 kids, then they would open the second room. And there would be 4 grades in the small room, and then later on 4 grades in the big room. We had, when I first got there, I think we only had 6 grades, but then it expanded to 8, so you could go the whole blooming time here. And here we were in what was traditionally the 1 or 2 room schoolhouse, and I don't think anybody there ever felt in the least bit deprived. Lena Phelps, who was our principal, our teacher, our mentor, our everything, loved poetry, loved literature. We memorized Poe and Longfellow. We learned the Gettysburg Address. We memorized everything. Miss Kathleen, who what started me on the school, would come in and teach music to us all. She taught us songs from Carmen, from the Mikado, from various other things. We had no idea that we were so privileged that we were learning what we were learning. These were just songs we were learning in school. And we were unusually privileged. Then we had Mrs. Spinney, who was the county music teacher, and she would come out and teach us our various instruments. We had cymbals and triangles and a couple of toot-toot horns. I played something called the saxet, and I think it's still around somewhere. And we had our school colors. We didn't know what our school colors were until they said we had to have uniforms to wear to a music festival in Bradenton. So our school colors either at that moment developed to be yellow and green, or perhaps they had been all along, we just didn't know it. We had little capes that came down back and the lapels turned out, and a little, like an overseas cap that we wore. And somewhere in your archives there must be a picture of that band, because I remember having seen it long after I grew up, the picture of the band standing out in front of the school, probably about 10 members out of all 8 grades. Of course, we didn't have playground equipment. We didn't have all the fancy things that the other schools had, so we did it ourselves. Right out of the main sandy lot by the school were our famous sand spurs and other weeds that grew by the billions. And we wanted a softball field. So we cleared the sand spurs, and we cut them down, and we raked and raked and raked and raked and raked. And for the years that we played softball in that field, we would still dive into the ground and get 6 sand spurs. But that was our softball field that we loved. Today, I am a devotee of air conditioning, and I cannot imagine that we played out there on those hot, hot days, running around and sweating like we did. But it was so much fun. There was a writer who lived in Tampa who came down to spend a couple of years on the island. His name was Bill Cox. Matter of fact, he had a little tiny square house right where Cafe Rogar, right? It's little tiny things. It's called Cox's Spots. And he had been not a major league, a minor league baseball player in his younger days. So he would come down to the school and teach us how to play softball and coach us and everything. We had probably much more fun than the kids today have in their fancy playgrounds. When you have to do it yourself, it means so much more. And not knowing about all these other things, we thought we were kingpins. We had it all. I don't know of anybody that went to that school that wouldn't have the same feelings. Lena was something in and of herself. She was a tiny, tiny little person. I wouldn't have dared call her Lena then. She was Mrs. Phelps. But now, it's okay, I'm grown up. And she was tiny, but boy, could she rule the roost. And I remember one particular boy's name was Randy Titchener, and his family owned Titchener's down at Bradenton Beach, and a lot of you will remember that. That's now Trader's Jack's in that location.
The Moose Hall now.
The what?
The Moose Hall now.
Oh, the Moose Hall. Okay. Well, it was Titchener's at that time. And Randy was a big, very big boy, very tall for his age. And it seems that one time Randy cut out some letters and he pasted them on the side of his desk, and he had written hell. Well, when Mrs. Phelps saw that, he had to stand in front of the class with his head bowed, put out his hand, while she stood there like that, smacking the daylights out of the palm of his hands with a ruler. And then he had to apologize to the class, and he had to scrape that off. That was considered a bad sin back then. Imagine today. As a matter of fact, I'm sure I've used up all my time. I just want to say one more thing. I remember that we, one day, the last day of school, we came from school, and on the corner of, I don't know the names of these, Spring and the street that came out of the school, there was an old building. I'm not sure whether it had been a house but it seems to me it had been a store, but it had never been a store in operation during the years that I lived here, because it was really old. It was what? It was a store. And it was falling down, the boards were coming off, the windows were broken, and it was just sort of the remains of something sitting there. And we were feeling so exuberant. It was the last day of school, and we took stones and we threw it at it and broke some more of these already broken windows. I didn't know I was being bad, but I caused a scandal. Seems that there were a couple of panes of glass that still could have been used, and the owner found out about it. And we had to, it was Polly and I, again, but mostly me, had to go and apologize to the man, had to go to all the people that were involved and apologize, and I had to work all summer watering the flowers, babysitting and so forth to pay for those panes of glass. You know, I think that sort of background would help today in the schools where they simply reprimand them for bringing a gun to school. I don't know what it's like down here in Florida, but I know even in Huntsville, Alabama, which is a fairly small city, it happens all the time. And I keep thinking, boy, they should have had Mrs. Phelps. But I'm going to close. I have a little granddaughter whose name is Anna Maria. And her, guess why? One of her lullabies, the song that she loves, was written by Mrs. Wardick, the grocery lady and the postmistress's mother. Mrs. Wingate. What was her first name?
Betty Heron.
Betty Heron Wingate.
Betty Heron Wingate.
And how many of you know the song, Anna Maria? Ah, good. You want to sing it with me? It's a lullaby for her. We sing it to her at night when she goes to sleep, and of course she believes completely that it was written for her. But for those of you who haven't heard it, there's a little island that is dear to me. The rest of you that know it, sing it. And no place on earth will ever dearer be, for wherever I may roam, it will always be sweet home. Oh, that wonderful little island in the sea. Oh, that beautiful southern island in the sea. Anna Maria, Isle of the Sea. Anna Maria, all hail to thee. Home of the happy, the brave, and the free. Beautiful Anna Maria. Amen.